Morning, everyone. I'm going to call this very brief meeting of the Finance Committee for Tuesday, December 20th, 22 to order. And I will move approval of the agenda for December 20th, 2022 Finance Committee meeting. Any changes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Turning to the minutes, I did notice one change that needs to be made. 22-2022 FIN on page 3 of 6. That is the postponing motion. It should be the original motion that is put there. And so, other than that change, does anybody else have any errors or omissions? No? Okay. So I will call the question, or I'll move approval of the minutes of November 29th, 2022 Finance meeting as amended. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And I will move that we adjourn the Finance Committee meeting. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
This job's easy.
All right, so now we'll go. I just have to pull up the other agenda here. Okay, and
Deja vu, like grandpa did.
good morning, everyone. I will call to order this special meeting of council for Tuesday, December 20th, 2022. And I will turn to Councillor McCallum for the land acknowledgement, please.
So anybody that knows me that knows that this week here is one of my favorite weeks in Canmore. And it's when you walk around town, you have the opportunity to see the kids come home, right? Come home for Christmas, spending time with their families. And I've seen so many joyous reunions right on Main Street between kids coming home from school, et cetera, and seeing like their previous boss or their guest starring in their coffee shop that they worked in for the next couple of weeks. And I love this. It's one of the 2 times of year that I think is peak Canmore, as I like to put it. And for me, it articulates the small town atmosphere that exists in Canmore and the celebration of our young people coming home to reconnect with their community culture. And this also allows me to reflect on the enormous number of Indigenous children who never had the opportunity to come home for their traditional holidays. Whether it was children scooped from healthy Indigenous families or children whose lives were changed or ended in residential schools, or even adult kids who eventually found themselves coming home to nations that were changed and damaged by the systemic absence of them over the last few generations. I think of these communities who never got to welcome their children home during their traditional holidays. The realities of our Indigenous neighbors present themselves to me in sharp contrast to the happy scenes that we will get to observe in our community over the coming weeks. And with that, I would like to recognize that we are located within the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta, and we honor and acknowledge the traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples of the Treaty 7 territory, comprised of the Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Goodstoney First Nation, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Blackfoot Confederacy. We acknowledge that this territory is home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3, and we acknowledge all nations who live, work, and play and help us steward this land and honor and celebrate this territory. I am grateful to live on these lands and commit to continue to working to live in right relations and to advance truth and reconciliation.
Thank you, Councillor McCallum. I'll now move that we adopt the agenda for the December 20th, 2022 special meeting of council. Any changes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And we'll move to our first agenda item, G1, 2023-2024 Utility Rate Amending Bylaws. Ms. Rogers.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Welcome to the special meeting of Council to do our budget approval for this cycle. We do have quite a full agenda today. I'll just give you a quick high-level overview, and then we'll jump right into item G1. So we've got a number of rate bylaws to have you approve on the utility side of things. We've got some project cancellations and the approval of the master fee schedule. I'll do a budget overview for you, just highlighting the points from your Finance Committee meetings. And then we've got a motion we need some support on for the e-bike incentive, fee approval for franchise fees, and then we'll end with the operating and capital budget approval. So first up is the water rates amending bylaw. As a reminder, Andreas Como presented these rates to you during the Finance Committee budget meetings. Once all operating and capital expenses are included and forecasting is done, the utility rate model is used to determine the required utility rates. The bylaws that were attached to your agenda package reflect the rates that were presented to you during the Finance Committee and are here for your approval today. We were planning just to go through the bylaws, not to do another presentation, as nothing has changed since Finance Committee. So over to you, Mayor Krausert, for the first bylaw.
Okay, I'll first open it up to council to see if they have any questions. Seeing none, I'll move that council give first reading to the water rate amending bylaw 2022-28. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that council give second reading to water rate amending bylaw 2022-28. Anyone speaking to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I will now seek leave from council to give third reading of water rate amending bylaw 2022-28. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And I'll move that council give third reading to water rate amending bylaw 2022-28. Would anyone like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously.
Next up, sewer rates.
Not one to mince words. Any questions on that riveting presentation? Seeing none, I move that council give first reading to sewer rate amending bylaw 2022-29. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I will move that council give second reading to sewer rate amending bylaw 2022-29. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now seek leave of council to give third reading of sewer rate amending bylaw 2022-29. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And I'll move that council give third reading to sewer rate amending bylaw 2022-29. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously.
Closing the bylaw section of this morning's meeting is the recyclable and waste disposal rates amending bylaw.
Are there any questions on this bylaw? Seeing none, I'll move that council give first reading to recyclables and waste disposal rate Amending Bylaw 2022-30. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll move the council give second reading to Recyclables and Waste Disposal Rate Amending Bylaw 2022-30. Anyone wishing to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now seek leave from council to give third reading of the Recyclables and Waste Disposal Rate Amending Bylaw 2022-30. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And I'll now move that council give third reading to the Recyclables and Waste Disposal Rate Amending Bylaw 2022-30. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. On to new business. H1, the master fee schedule and 2022 capital projects cancellation.
Thank you. So at the October 25th Finance Committee meeting, administration had presented two capital projects to you for cancellation. The first is the asset and work order software, and the second, the passenger rail and impact study. Since that meeting on October 25th, the political landscape in the province has changed fairly significantly. And on November 15th, Premier Danielle Smith indicated an interest in exploring options for the creation of a rail link between Calgary and Canmore Banff. This is a shift in direction from the previous government or previous premier, and based on this new information, council could choose to keep capital project 7236 for the passenger rail station and impact study as an active project carried over to 2023. So we had two motions prepared for you there with the option to either cancel both of those projects or cancel 7224 and then keep 7236 as an active project. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about either of those.
And just for council's sake, my intent is to lead with, after doing the master fee schedule, lead with the very bottom motion there with respect to the passenger rail station. And should that pass, then I will move the middle motion. Should the first one not pass, then I will move the top motion.
Okay.
Okay?
So quickly, master fee schedule, proposing that the 2023-2024 master fee schedule be approved as presented during the Finance Committee budget meeting. Just draw your attention to council meeting of December 6th, where the planning department prepared a new bylaw for you, which included the addition of a partial building permit fee that has been incorporated into the master fee schedule. So that is current, reflecting that change. Again, happy to answer any questions you might have about that.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, so I will first move that council approve the 2023-2024 master fee schedule as presented. Anybody wish to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I will now move that council direct administration to keep capital project 7236 passenger rail station and impact study as an active project carried over to 2023. Speaking to that motion, building on what Ms. Rogers said, I believe that the tides have turned. I'll be very surprised if this project does not move to the detailed design stage, given that it has been placed in the Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors mandate letter, and given that Premier Smith has spoke to this on multiple occasions, including sending a letter to Mayor Gondek in support of it. And so I think that we should just stay the course, and then should that detailed, or should the project move to detailed planning, then we can have this already in place so that we can stay in locksteps and stay current with things as they happen. Anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will support this motion, although I'm not as optimistic as you are in terms of it happening in the near term. I am optimistic that it will happen someday. And I think that there is value in, whenever that day is, determining as a community where the best place to have the rail station for future planning, as well as being able to anticipate any impacts that are going to occur to our community, whether, again, the rail comes in 6 years or in 30 years. I think having those lands identified and having the impacts identified will help us understand how we are going to receive rail when and if it comes to Canmore. So I'll be happy to support this.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Okay. Councillor Graham.
I too will support this, yet I have reservations as well as to when this will happen. And I hope that it happens. I hope that if it does happen, it is in the immediate future and not 30 years from now. I think the idea that putting a study together for something too far away is the landscape will likely change too much. The political landscape is changing rapidly out there. I'm not super optimistic that this is going to happen or not. We keep seeing it change frequently. So I'll support it, and hopefully we see something more direction come down the line.
Councillor Hillstad.
I will also support this. It's better to be prepared for if this does happen. If it doesn't, then it's just, we'll get to do this all over again next year.
Councillor Mara.
Thank you. I too will support this motion. I think it's good to have it in place. As Councillor McCallum said, it's there if we things move forward, and if not, we can bump it down the road again or cancel it. Thank you.
Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Worship. I'll support. It's a fluid situation that we should just have our ducks in a row just in case. Thank you.
Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I will call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Then move that Council cancel the 2022 approved capital project 7224 asset and work order software. Anybody like to speak to that motion? So now I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. All right, we will now move on to item H2, 2023-2024 budget approval.
All right, thank you. So just starting way back at the beginning of our first Finance Committee meetings, just providing some context for you, the objective of the Finance Committee is to demonstrate fiscal responsibility in a transparent and public manner. And you clearly did that by holding 6 public meetings to review operating and capital plans, and by making several amendments to both the proposed operating and capital budgets. Finance Committee recommended these revised budgets be brought to Council for approval, and that's what we're doing today. In addition to the hours of meetings reviewing the budget, each councillor spent a significant amount of time reviewing their budget materials to prepare for those meetings and for the amendments that you made. Administration also spent significant time preparing, reviewing, and presenting those budget materials. Today's presentation will focus on the details of the budget as recommended by Finance Committee. Where am I? Hold on. Sorry. Council approved policy directs administration on financial matters, including transfers to reserves, debt, and the application of cost of living allowances to staff wages. Your strategic plan directs administration on your priorities for the community. And there are many master plans that are approved by Council for planning purposes that identify long-range priorities across the organization. Okay. Additionally, the majority of our program services and tasks are delivered through regular routine municipal operations, providing important and highly valued services to the community and in alignment with your overall vision and goals. These programs and services are either legislated, essential, or approved in previous budget cycles and really form the bulk of the operating budget. This budget is the first and second year really of Council's strategic plan. Your strategic plan covers 2023 through 2026. And you'll recall you created this plan early in 2022 where your vision and goals were developed, including 3 or 4 results for each of those. Council's 3 goals are livability, environment, and relationships, and also the foundational pillars of financial stewardship, human resources, and community engagement. On June 7th of 2022, Council directed administration to return at the time of budget deliberations with ideas for bold initiatives to address livability and environment in Canmore, including but not limited to increasing income-appropriate housing and affordability. Administration across the organization worked to develop options for Council's consideration to advance these strategic priorities. Included in this work were those actions already being undertaken and ideas for new initiatives. This process resulted in broad involvement of staff from across the organization and collaboration between teams to develop solutions and determine which items were bold and which were suggestions the municipality could not implement as they were outside of our jurisdiction, and also to update those initiatives already being undertaken. Those bold initiatives were pulled together to form the implementation plan as shown in attachment 1 of your package. And this plan includes those high-impact actions designed to move the needle on Council's strategic priorities and allowed Finance Committee to choose which options you wish to include in the budget. Okay. With budget direction on July 5th, Council gave administration marching orders to prepare a status quo budget. And this status quo budget includes the cost to maintain existing programs and services at existing levels, and also addressed growth and increased volumes at those status quo service levels. Affiliates were provided with the same budget direction that you gave town administration, and their requests represent a status quo approach as well. We did face some budget pressures pulling this budget together. Record inflation, rising costs, higher borrowing costs due to increased interest rates, and ongoing COVID-19 impacts, as well as decreased funding from all levels of government have led to an increase in budgets. This budget ensures that funding is in place to continue to deliver existing town programs and services. And this budget cycle clearly sheds light on the financial challenges being faced by the town and the community and the broader country. As we head into these budget years, residents and businesses still need and expect municipal services and are asking for or need more services, infrastructure, and amenities. And many factors in this broader environment have significant impact on the town's expenses. High inflation is being felt across the board in our expense categories, and we have included cost of living adjustments of 5.9% in 2023 and 2.6% in 2024. At the same time, we're not experiencing any increases or new grants from other levels of government. In fact, we have factored in a 12 to 15% decrease in MSI funding in 2025, and the future of the local government fiscal framework remains uncertain. We have yet to hear how that will be distributed and what impact that will have on us. And rising interest rates are impacting borrowing costs for our debt-funded projects. COVID is impacting us in terms of broken supply chain issues, so we're seeing some increase on some of our capital projects or time to get materials. And then labor market issues that have resulted from COVID are impacting us both as an organization and our community as well. On the revenue side of things, 2 items to draw your attention to. One is franchise fees. Increases to both Fortis and ATCO franchise fees are recommended in 2024. Where we see the contribution to sustainability reserve and asset rehab and replacement reserves rise as a result of these increases. A long-term plan to increase Fortis franchise fees has been presented to get the maximum allowable limit. And on the ATCO side of things, the proposal is that that maximum limit be achieved in 2024. Franchise fee revenue is a piece of the revenue puzzle, which is designed to generate revenue from a different customer base. While this base does include many municipal taxpayers, it also includes renters, schools, churches, the federal and provincial governments, all of whom are exempt from paying municipal tax. By using a franchise fee to generate income from exempt community members, the burden of paying for town services is slightly more equitably distributed. And new to the town in a significant way this year is revenue from paid parking. You'll recall we launched paid parking in the downtown core this summer. Paid parking revenue has been used to cover both the costs of delivering the program and also to establish a town center grant, $50,000, which will come back to you next year with some criteria around. And then the Finance Committee provided direction to fund 33% of our transit costs, including enhanced services, from paid parking revenue. Oh, that doesn't line up very well, does it? Sorry. Under this direction from the Finance Committee to fund 33% of the transit from paid parking revenue, some space was created for you to add some livability and safety initiatives. So you had recommended to Council changes or enhancements to the Affordable Services Program, including an e-bike incentive program. You added an emergency notification system. You have added an emergency response plan preparation for unsheltered individuals. The citizen input panel was put into the budget to get greater citizen engagement. A community evaluator position was added, and with it, support for the Safe Park program. And you added some enhanced childcare programming in terms of the Adventure Club, support for Happy Pad housing to help address challenges folks are having in finding a place to live, and then the Three Sisters ice surface. Additional direction was provided to administration to return in 2023 for an allocation model for paid parking revenue, to provide options for your consideration for car share program, and also to review Canmore Community Housing's requisition history and future. And all of these factors have resulted in the budget that is before you today. Total expenditures and transfers are budgeted at $68 million for 2023 and $72 million for 2024. And once we remove from that or deduct from that our revenue sources and growth, the tax increase for 2023 is 12.5% and 5.5% for 2024. We've done a bit of an assumption modeling here for you, just on the impact of that tax increase on the median residential household property. So we've had to use last year's assessment. 2023 assessment is not available yet. It comes in February. But based on those numbers, that 12.5% increase is approximately $226 per year, or about $18.84 per month for residential property. Before I move on to capital, are there any questions on what I've covered so far?
A couple of notes, please. Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Councillor Graham?
One if I may. What is the, so we're using median residential household assessment. What is the average right now? I thought it was like about 1 point. 1.2, 1.4? Anybody know? It's more of just
No.
curious.
We can get it for you. Yeah.
Just curious more than anything
Yeah.
else. Yeah.
Yeah, we have, over the years, looked at different models, either average or median. Median seems to be a bit more reflective of the vast differences that we see in house value in Canmore, with some extremely expensive properties at one end that kind of skew an average a bit, but we can certainly get that information for you.
I think using median is the right number. I
Yeah.
was curious what the average was. Thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions? Please proceed.
Okay. When preparing the capital budget, a number of considerations are factored in. We start with a review of our policies, looking at debt and reserve policies. Master plans are reviewed, which have identified long-term infrastructure needs. Strategic plan is always consideration in how we can support and advance council's priorities. Grants, which I spoke about a bit earlier, help dictate how much funding we have available for various projects. Our asset management work helps us plan which assets need to be repaired or replaced at which times. And then the funding envelope in terms of how much funding is actually available and how much staff time is available to deliver projects round out those considerations. The capital budget at its high level identifies the assets to be required and the required funding to do so. An action plan for that upcoming period of what assets are needed and how they'll be funded is really what that capital budget tells us. This year in your Finance Committee presentations, we grouped all of our capital projects really into one of 5 types. We had a bucket of projects that supported council priorities. There were some items around public safety, including some flood mitigation work and hazard repair. And we're really looking there at risk to the community. We've got a grouping of plans and studies, and there we're looking at growth management plans, condition assessments, which help us plan long-term capital work, and also some stakeholder input. Life cycling and asset management is another category, and that's really looking at system-level condition assessments on things like bridges, roads, trails, buildings, deep utilities. We've got some council policy related to asset management and life cycling around fleet vehicles. We do inspections following industry best practice and safety standards in terms of playgrounds. And we have some assets that are at failure or near failure. An example this year is the ice resurfacer. So we'll use those assets as long as possible. When the cost to repair starts to exceed the cost to replace, we switch over to a replacement model. And then there are some items related to growth or upgrades that are required to just really address what's happening within our community. New or expanded infrastructure that's required by growth, or improvements we need to address user, community, or regulatory needs. As with the operating budget, Finance Committee made a number of changes to the capital plan, again focused on your priority areas of livability, environment, and safety. These initiatives included support for Stoney Nakoda in an Indigenous-led area-based conservation program, property tax task force to really look at the impact of property tax and how we can best manage that moving forward. You moved up the both design and construction for some odor challenges we're having at the wastewater treatment plant. Trail signage and mapping for safety, etiquette, and wayfinding is an item that you added in. And then the Quarry Lake jumping platform. And at a high-level summary, the 6-year capital plan looks like this. So you're approving today 23 and 24, and then the plan years 25 through 28. I'll stop there in case there are any questions around capital.
I don't see any.
Okay, thank you. We did have a change in direction to a motion provided by Finance Committee on November 24th. Since this motion was approved by Finance Committee, administration has determined that we cannot implement the e-bike rebate program in 2023 as directed. And so the motion before you asks council to amend the budget to move the entire $50,000 from motion 50-2022 FIN into year 2024. So the spirit and the intent of the original motion, we feel, will still be met. It's just that the program would be administered completely in 2024 rather than spread over the 2 years to allow for some workload capacity challenges there.
Any questions on that? Councillor Faubert?
Why is that? Why can't it be implemented in 2024 or 2023?
23, the
Yeah. What year
sustainability
is it?
team workload is such that they can't take on an additional
Okay.
project. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't see any.
So we could call the vote on that motion now if you like, or if you prefer to do it all at the end, we can do that as well.
Sure. While it's up, let's do that. Oh, Councillor Graham.
Where would this project fall in administration?
With our sustainability team, and they've got a number of initiatives already in the capital
Right.
project that they're working on and prioritizing. Two.
Ms. Smithers?
Yes, thank you. So in the Public Works Administration operating budget, there already is a line item for a greenhouse gas reduction programs. So this would be increasing that budget by $50,000 in 2024 because this is a good fit with that work that they're already taking on.
And this project wouldn't fall under the community monitoring person?
No.
That doesn't make sense, right? No. Thank you.
Councillor Maw?
Thank you, Your Worship. Question for admin. I think one of the drivers behind this project was to start to reduce our GHGs more readily and also kind of help with the financial burden. Is there some sort of situation where if someone wanted to adopt early, say in 2023, buy an e-bike, but then they could hold on to the receipt so that in 2024, when there is capacity to administer the program, that they could apply for it for a previous purchase? I'm just trying to think of ways that people, if they wanted to make the shift to get onto e-bikes sooner, this could still help that, but not put an additional burden.
Ms. Smithers or Dr.
No.
Cottle?
No, I mean, I love the idea, but this is a capacity issue. It's a department of 2 people, and rebates are wonderful programs, but they are incredibly time-consuming and resource-intensive. And so if we set up a system where people can purchase in advance, but we might as well implement in 2023, and we can't. So they need to fundamentally change their workload program. They have many things on the go around GHG emissions. This will be an important one for sure. But there are other things we'll be implementing in 2023 which will help with that. And we're also implementing other changes in 2023 around affordability. So while it's unfortunate that this needs to wait a year from a workload capacity, we just don't have it in 2023. It's a small but mighty department with a lot on the go.
Okay, thank you.
I would add too, from our discussions at Finance Committee, it wasn't simply a matter of buying an e-bike and submitting a receipt. It was more geared at those who would qualify for our affordability services. So there's additional work to be done there.
Sorry, can I go again?
Yeah.
Just thanks for that. Just adding to that, in 2023, we are increasing the marketing of the Affordable Services Program so that hopefully, right, in an effort to get more participants and people enrolled. So there'll be some changes to that program in 2023. So to your point, in some ways, waiting for 2024 may actually increase the breadth of people who are eligible and able to participate when this does roll out.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to move that council amend the Public Works operating budget by removing $25,000 included in each year of 2023-2024 operating budget for an e-bike incentive program, and adding $50,000 in one-time funding in 2024 for an e-bike incentive program as part of the town's affordable services program funded from the Sustainability Reserve. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
All right. Next up, we'll circle back to the Fortis franchise fee. So we do require council to approve a motion here so that we can apply those increases. These increases would be advertised as required in the fall of 2023 with rate increases starting in 2024. And again, just to summarize, on the Fortis side of things, we're recommending an increase in 2024 to 16%, and then 2% every other year until the maximum permissible rates are reached, which are 20%. And then on the ATCO side, one increase to the maximum of 35% is recommended to begin in 2024.
Thank you. Before I make that motion, are there any questions? I will then move that council approve 2024 Fortis franchise fees at 16% and thereafter a 2% increase every other year until the maximum fees permissible of 20% is achieved in 2030, and approve 2024 ATCO franchise fees at the maximum of 35%. We've already spoken to this at Finance Committee, but given the times, we need to be able to access revenue, and using this tool allows us to access revenue that is based on usage. And so one can keep their fees down by using less. And for those who do not, then they'll obviously be contributing through these fees to the revenues of the town. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving to the operating budget.
All right, and that brings us to the last few motions, which I'm missing, sorry, a couple of, but you have them there. We're looking at approval for the operating budget for 2023 and 2024, and then adopting the operating plans for 25 and 26. And then approval of the capital budget 23 and 24, and adopting the 25 through 28 capital plans as presented. And we're happy to answer any questions there might be about either of those.
I see none.
Bless you.
Bless you. Thank you very much.
Oh, there's another page. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to move that council approve the 2023 operating budget for $68,302,946 and the 2024 operating budget for $73,216,109, and adopt the 2025 to 2026 operating plans as presented. Before speaking to that motion, I'm first seeking to determine sorry, Dr. Cottle, did you ring in?
I did. I tried to ring out, but
okay.
but I just thought Mr. Irwin has pulled the average assessments, and just because the question came up and you're about to vote, I thought you might like to know the average residential assessment for 2022 is $765,000. So the median we were using, 800, is actually higher than the average.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and before speaking to the motion, I'm wondering if anyone will be seeking to put forward an amendment. All right, seeing none, I will speak to this motion. it's things that we've spoken to before, but I think it's important to point out that nobody, including council and administration, likes taxes going up. Of course, we understand the past few years have been difficult on everyone, and the prospect of a double-digit tax increase can cause additional stress. However, just like the hit to all of our families and businesses' budgets this past year, the town of Canmore is subject to the same significant inflationary forces and interest rate increases that have raised the cost of living and for doing business. This budget represents a status quo level of services and programs being provided to the community, all of which were asked for by residents over the years. The budget also advances priorities such as a transit service enhancements, increasing affordable services to retain and attract families, emergency notifications and response plans, reducing our impact on climate change, and productive public engagement. As we've heard, the anticipated 12.5% municipal property tax increase in context for a residential unit at the median assessed value of $800,000 should expect a property tax increase of approximately $18.84 a month. Our monitoring of 19 similar communities in the region shows that Canmore's taxes per dwelling unit continue to be around average. While administration found savings in the budget, the challenge we face is that the vast majority of increases to the budget are out of our control. There are increases to insurance, banking fees, professional fees, the RCMP contract moving to Canmore covering 90% instead of 70% due to our population exceeding 15,000 people. There's also transit cost increase, contracted services, supplies and energy costs, costs for the library, museum, and arts place, and all of this results in a 5.9% budget increase. As well, there are cost of living adjustments for employees due to inflation. That's a 4.1% budget increase. The human resource market rate adjustments due to prior COVID-19 freeze, as well as an increase to the cost of benefits, is a 2.4% budget increase. And the highest interest rates on debt, especially related to the new fire hall, 1.1% budget increase. Many tangible benefits are provided by the municipality through the budget, which are vital to the ongoing health of the community. These include everything from essential services and keeping the community clean and safe to services that provide recreation opportunities, business supports, special events to attend, social supports, and neighborhood connections. Of course, there is also the physical infrastructure and human resources required to deliver these benefits. I'm confident this budget reflects the true cost of delivering existing services to the community. Further, I believe we as residents receive tremendous value for our tax dollars. It's important to note that concurrent to these budgetary pressures, we are receiving less funding from the province, as well as providing essential services lacking in our community that are a provincial responsibility. This results in the town of Canmore having to tax our residents for these costs instead. Again, I want to emphasize that Council recognizes that any increase in taxes impacts the finances of our residents, ourselves included. These are extremely difficult decisions made pursuant to our duty to protect and further the best interests of the community as a whole. And so I will be supporting this motion. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert. I'd like to speak in favor of the motion and support approval of the operating budget for both 2023 and 2024 and the operating plans as presented. I think it's important for our community to understand that there are a lot of details and there are a lot of context beyond just a percentage increase number. And to focus, I don't think it's the best to only focus on that number without understanding how we got to the number the factors influencing budgeting for us and all municipalities in Canada and Alberta right now, and that we've done a lot of work to maintain the excellent services that we provide, and also within a very restrained fiscal process, we've put a lot of things in this budget that will drive towards our strategic plan and our strategic priorities. And one of the things that I think people forget is that the bill, the number they see, I do the monthly program. So that monthly amount that I pay to the town for my taxes does not actually, that total number is not the municipal tax number. That's the municipal tax plus the provincial requisition and a number of other smaller requisitions. So say I pay $200 a month in taxes. The 12.5% increase does not apply to that number. It applies to about half of that number. So getting into the details, and I think engaging with us and the community engaging with us, I think that there's incredible value for what we do. And if we take inflation and we take population growth, which are factors that we have to budget for, then the number actually becomes a lot more palatable, I think, for people. So while this, and I think over the last year as well, I saw a number of municipalities that were in double-digit tax increases. And I think that the fiscal environment that we exist in right now as a municipal government in Alberta is more difficult than it's ever been. And when I look at the comparators of our community to other communities and our tax rates, I actually have some confidence that, you know, we aren't overtaxing, and we're not just spending. There is a lot of, I think, responsibility around how we budget as a council and how our administration puts together the budget to bring in front of us each year. So it's always difficult, I think, to increase people's costs, especially in an environment where affordability is such a challenge for many people. We also still are providing and increasing the services in our community in next year for the budget in ways that actually address affordability. So it's really hard because the message out there is always do more and spend less. And that's just actually physically not possible. So I think that we've done an excellent job, not just with our strategic priorities, but seeking out ways to act on those and to move the needle on a number of issues without seeing that number that came in front of us go up even more. So I'm really proud of the work that we've done, and I will support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Faubert. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a chance to chat with our former mayor a couple days ago, actually, about this potential increase, and it was interesting because he and I continue to go back to that revised budget of 2020, in which we took our surplus and inserted it into sort of the working and small business community of Canmore, but at the same time gave a 0% tax increase. And we're still paying for it right here in this budget right here. And so I want to apologize, actually, because that was part of my idea, I guess, was to bring that. He reminded me that he was actually, I think, in favor of a 4.5 that year. But yeah, so I guess I wanted to point out that the trickle down that over years where you have to play catch up, and we're still playing catch up, and then you add catch up to inflation and to labor issues and supply chain, and it just makes life more expensive. You know, don't think the public realizes how much the provincial government is no longer transferring to us anymore as well, and that has left a huge hole in our budget. And then in addition to the downloading that we're also receiving, based on the report that administration brought forward, almost equates this 12% increase, which is, moment. And at some point, you can shave and you can shave and you can shave, but you've hit the bone, and we've hit the bone. You know, there's important base services that as a municipality that we are required to provide, and we are required to provide at a certain level, and they cost money, and they require staff, and they require equipment, and they require upgrading, and this budget addresses all of those things. And I also believe that there was a lot of like little onesies, twosies, you know, $7,000 here, $17,000 here, that last 2 days that we met, that I think really are going to have some high impact in livability and affordability in Canmore, and are directed specifically at a certain population in our community that is truly struggling. And so I'm really proud of those amendments, and I'm proud of the administration being thoughtful and imaginative and innovative in bringing those forward. And I'm pleased that my colleagues have decided that they want to support those. You know, it's interesting in an environment like this, you know, like if you're in private business, you're encouraged to be innovative, because through innovation, sometimes you make mistakes and you learn from those mistakes. But almost in public service, it's like we are told not to, yet we demand innovation from our elected officials. But when, if there's mistakes that are made, or if it doesn't perform up to, there's this other side of, well, you shouldn't. So I'm really proud of these innovative initiatives that are being put forward, and I think they're careful and measured, and I think they will bring us some return. Every year I say that this is the hardest budget. And I remember my first budget, 2010, Ron Casey. I was right there. You know, this is a difficult budget. We were knee-deep in the economic, the world crash, basically. We were crawling out of that. We watched our business community nearly collapse at the time. And the council the following year had the vision to start considering building Elevation Place. And I recollect at the time that people told us that, you know, it would be empty and you could shoot a cannon through it and so on. And it was too big, and I've got every email. I promise you, I have every email. And the place vibrates. It's so busy. So I guess I want to look back to the wisdom of previous councils that have, you know, prepared in terms of putting money away in our reserves and keeping us safe that way. That's the only way we would have been able to respond to the flood, to the explosion, to any of these massive issues, to the pandemic, is having these funds put away, but at the same time, carefully taxing and considering what kind of costs we need to share with our friends and neighbors and constituents. And so I'll be supporting both the capital and operating plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCallum. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is only my second budget, and I found it exceptionally hard. Having said that, with regards to, say, like holding like a 0% tax increase during some of those COVID times, that was really appreciated. Like, that was uncharted territory. It's pretty hard to see around those corners, and as a business owner myself and a resident at that time, it was meaningful. But here we are at this current time, and the ripples of the pandemic are still crazy, and who knew all these other things are coming down the pipe. And I just felt that this last budget process, working with all of you, working with admin, it was a lot of work, but I think the work that was done was meaningful. If I look on this upcoming budget, this tax increase, if I could sum it up, behind all that deliberate, thoughtful work that was done by all of you, I would consider what we have put forward, given the circumstances, as compassionate, prudent, but also forward-thinking. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Ma. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Graham?
Thank you, everyone. A lot of thoughtful words before me here, and I won't pontificate too long, but I'm frugal. I'm a frugal kind of guy. I have an old Patagonia puffy jacket that I bought the year I got here. It has more duct tape applied to that thing than should ever be applied. You know they fix them for free. I know, but I just don't want to send it. And it's not free. I have sent stuff away to the Patagonia. They're one of the companies I love, but this didn't end up being an infomercial. I'm also a business owner, and this year I had to increase my prices a little bit. My expenses went up. My utility bill is significantly more than it used to be. The cost of doing business increased. The cost of my household increased. I never thought that I would be approving a 12.5% increase to taxes. I never ever thought that would happen. And here I am. We asked a lot of hard questions. We put a lot of time and effort into this budget. Administration put a lot of time and effort into this budget. And I think this does go a long way to address our priorities, the community's priorities. I do think it's ironic that downloading number is pretty much 12.5, and I would be remiss to say that the province is sitting on a $15 billion surplus. We want to talk about equitable transfers with the federal, provincial, and municipal levels. I would happily have that conversation. Anyways, I want to thank everybody for this, the time and effort they put into this, and I hope the community understands where we're coming from with a lot of these numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Mara?
Thank you. I think everything's been said, and I appreciate all the comments. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who has, all of council, all the administration. We're all residents here. We're all going to be paying this 12.5%. And I think we've put a lot of thought. We've addressed a lot of our strategic plan. We've addressed a little bit for everybody. We can't be everything to everybody. But I think it's well thought out and we dug down deep into everything that was in there, tried to cut, tried to add, and we still came down to the 12.5. It could have probably been a lot higher. And with everything being downloaded on us, I think we've come out doing pretty good. And just noting that we're being responsible and we're not going to be falling behind, and yet we're not being, as some people say, we're living the life of luxury, but I don't think we are. I think we're just doing what our residents would like. To a certain point, but staying fiscally responsible. So I'd like to thank everybody up here and down there for all your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mara. Councillor Hillstad?
As everyone's already said, everything's already been said, but in a lot of ways this could easily have been higher. In a lot of ways it should be higher because we still have a shortfall when it comes to asset reserves and other things. So, you know, the fact that we kept it as, even though it seems high, we kept it as low as we should and probably still went lower than we should have. There's a lot of things that are going to need to be replaced in time, and we're going to still have to find ways to do that. And so that just means that we've, you know, punted that issue down the road a little bit more. And again, like, it's never fun when things go up. But they do. I know, you know, just for fun, you know, went to go get some lettuce and it was just like, holy junk, that is expensive. So I got kale instead, because it was cheaper for some reason. But yeah, everything's going up. It just is the times that we're in. So again, thank you to admin and to all of my council colleagues. I think we've done a good job with the hand we've been dealt, and yeah, no, it's never fun to have an increase, but it could have been a lot more.
Thank you, Councillor Hillstad. Right, so the motion is on the floor. I'll now call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that council approve the 2023 capital budget for $37,233,000 and the 2024 capital budget for $24,169,000 and adopt the 2025 to 2028 capital plans as presented. Before speaking to the motion, is there anyone that's wanting to bring forward an amendment? Seeing none, I'm not going to repeat what was said before, but I believe that there are some really important capital projects here. It's important to note for our residents that there's a variety of sources of funding for capital projects: grants, reserves, debentures, and then some transfer from operating. So when people see a project, it's not just a matter of if you cancel a project, it will just relate to a tax savings. It doesn't work that way. And in many cases, we actually cannot afford to cancel a project. It will have too much of a dire impact on our community, such as when we have to expand or replace wastewater treatment plants and the pump house. So, I will definitely support these capital projects and this motion. Councillor Faubert.
I kind of wanted to get a little Pollyanna on this one because I think that the capital budget is an exciting place because it's where we get stuff done. It's where we do things. It's where we can create the community in the future that our community wants and that we envision for it. And yeah, it costs money. And there are a lot of things that I'm really excited about in the capital project, and including the pump house, totally. And I'd also like to volunteer to be the first person to jump off the Quarry Lake platform once it's complete, because that's going to be awesome. So just trying to get more excited about budgeting.
Big splash.
Thank you, Councillor Faubert. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. We'll now move on to item H3, the 2023-2024 First Response Fire Agreement with the MD of Bighorn. Dr. Cottle.
Therese, do you want this? Oh, yes,
Okay.
right, I'm ready to conduct.
Okay.
There's only a few days I can wear this outfit, so gotta break it out.
All right. I'll call order, please.
Sorry. Thank you. Your worship, or Mayor Krausert and members of council, I'm here with a 2023-2024 First Response Fire Agreement with the MD of Bighorn. asking that council authorize the mayor and the CAO to execute this agreement with the MD of Bighorn as attached in your agenda for a 2-year term beginning January 1st of next year. And up on the screen is the map that was missing. I just received the map after the agenda went out from the MD, so it will make part of the official package. I wanted to make sure council was aware of it before making this motion. So we have several different agreements with the MD of Bighorn. The MGA requires that bordering communities have intercollaboration frameworks, and there's rules within those, the MGA of what those frameworks need to accomplish. And one of the issues that's part of an intercollaboration framework is that when there's a neighboring municipality and shared services or regional services that the residents of those municipalities pay appropriately for the services that they receive, and that the system for setting up that payment is fair and transparent and clear, so that it's not subject to the whims of administrators who have differing opinions or the politics of the day, that there's a clear, transparent, and fair system in place. And so, for example, we have an agreement with the MD around recreation, because a lot of residents from the MD come to Canmore to enjoy the recreation center and Elevation Place. And that model, that agreement is based on population. So we look at the total population of Canmore, the total population of the MD. We factor in the cost for recreation, plus the cost to run the facility, plus there's a percentage of administrative costs. There's time from HR and IT and finance that all go into recreation. And then the MD pays a portion based on population. We have a water and wastewater agreement. Mr. Como's gone, so I forget the details. I haven't looked at it lately, in the MD, and that's based on consumption and usage, because we can very easily measure that. With the fire first response agreement is a little bit unique. We have a lot of fire agreements for mutual aid. So a mutual aid agreement is when a town or a municipality has their own fire department, but there are times when there might be an event that's so big that they need assistance from another community. And so we call in additional resources, and we have lots of agreements in place in the surrounding areas for how those work and who will pay for what in the event of a mutual aid call. What's happened in this, with this agreement in particular, the MD does have a fire department. They have a fire chief, and then they have paid response staff. So there are some sections of the MD that they provide first response to, but because of the geography of the MD and where the development is, this map provides places where they are not able to provide an appropriate first response with the resources they have. So they've asked the town of Canmore if our fire department could be their first line of defense. So the system is set up so that when a 911 call comes in, our fire department is dispatched to these areas as if it is a town of Canmore response. So this is different than a mutual aid agreement. In a mutual aid agreement, all of the fees to run a fire department are paid for initially in the municipality, and you're only paying the fee for specific services you receive. In this case, the way we've structured the agreement with the MD is around assessment value and paying for the full service for the fire department. So the agreement that's in front of you identifies the assessments within the town of Canmore and the assessments for properties within this map, within the MD, which is 3% of the total when you combine those two numbers. So what we've also then done is identified the full cost of running the fire department and 3% of our administrative fees. Again, fire needs HR and IT and executive office supports, all those other supports. And we do back out things from the fire budget that the MD wouldn't benefit from. So for example, we have a training officer who we're currently recruiting for. That officer will not do any work in these lands. It's only within the town of Canmore, so that cost is backed out. So it's not, while it looks, it's a full cost accounting, we do account for things where the MD does not benefit. So the MD has executed this agreement at their council, and we have 2 signed copies. We're asking council today to approve this agreement, and then when the MD gets a new CAO in place, I will work with that new CAO and we'll work with the intermunicipal committee to review the agreement within the 2-year timeframe. Happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Councillor Graham.
On the CAO note, could this wait until they did put a permanent CAO in place, and would that be prudent?
Our current agreement ends December, so if we didn't do some kind of extension, we would no longer be providing services to them as of January 1st, and they don't have a fire department who could provide first response. So, no, we would need some kind of extension. I made the offer to the MD to let me know what time frame they suggested, and they asked for the 2 years, so I'm happy to support that. I will say, based on my own experience, this was initially set to end in June, and the previous CAOs from both the MD and Canmore brought a proposal to extend it for 6 months to give us enough time. 6 months was really tough, just given how much there is to do when you're a new CAO. So I suggested longer than 6 months, just not knowing how long the MD's recruitment process will take. And so they requested the 2 years, and we're happy to support that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And I should say, this agreement is exactly the same as the last agreement. The numbers in Schedules B and C have been updated with the current budget, but the language, the only real change to the agreement is we took out gendered language that assumed that a fire chief was male and brought the agreement into the 21st century. But otherwise, it's exactly the same. No change.
Great. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Dr. Cottle. I'll move that council authorize the mayor and CAO to execute the first response fire agreement with the MD of Bighorn as attached for a 2-year term beginning January 1st, 2023. I will be voting in favor of this motion for all of the reasons that Dr. Cottle spoke to. Anybody else like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now, before adjourning, I thought only during the meeting that we haven't been formally introduced to our new deputy clerk. And so I'm wondering if Madam Clerk Hyde, if you would like to introduce our new deputy clerk.
Certainly. I'll come up. Thank you, Mayor Krauser. So I would like to introduce council to Alyssa Reigersberg. Alyssa joined us, it will be 2 weeks on Thursday. This is her first council meeting. Her previous job, she was a legislative advisor at Spruce Grove, the town of Spruce Grove. So she's an Alberta girl from Edmonton originally, correct? Yeah. And hopefully she is a Canmore girl forever and ever and ever.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Hyde and Ms. Reichersberg. Welcome to the town of Canmore, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much. It's nice to meet everybody.
Thank you. With that, I'll now move that we adjourn. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. See everybody back here at 1 o'clock for the committee of the whole.